Okay, so in this video I'm going to show you how to control the animation state using a custom script. The one thing that's changed from the last video is I got rid of the samba dancing clip and added the yelling clip. I did that just so that our character won't walk off screen every time I hit play, so I won't have to keep going to the scene view. Okay, so to start with, in this Animator window, we have layers. We can create different animation layers. That's not what we're talking about here. We want to use parameters, and these are how we'll kind of interact with the animator. So we can create a bunch of different variables that we can control from code, which can also be used to control transitions between animation states. So a float is a decimal number, an int is an integer, whole number, bool is true or false, and a trigger is kind of a one-time event. So I'll start with a trigger. In a way, it's kind of the simplest one. So I'll go trigger, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to have it be boxing by default, and then when I press, say, the space bar, I'll have him switch to yelling and then go back. So I'll call this trigger yell. So it's nice and descriptive. And then I'll say make transition to yelling. And then I'll click on that transition. And then I can add a condition here. So I'll add, and by default, this is our only parameter. So yell is our condition. So as soon as yell is triggered, we will transition from boxing to yelling. And I want to turn this checkbox off. This is has exit time. So if I have this on, this transition will only happen if yell has been triggered and the playhead reaches the end of boxing. So if we want something that's responding to a button input, we want it to be like instant or very close to instant. So I'll go ahead and turn that off. And now I can still use this to control how long the transition happens. But now this will happen whenever I actually trigger it. So let's leave it at that for now. And I'm going to add actually a script that's listening for a key press. And when it gets the key press, it will trigger this trigger. So I'll add component, and I will name it something descriptive like trigger animator. I don't know. Add it. And I'll think about it for a moment. Okay. And then I'll just double click on it and it should open Visual Studio. Do not recover. Okay, interesting. So opening that. Let's try that again. Here we go. All right. So just like with any of our scripts, I want to get a reference to that animator. So I'll just go Animator. Anim is usually what I write, so it's nice and short, but I still know what it is. Anim equals get component animator. Right. So this is the same kind of paradigm that we've used many times to get a reference to another component that's attached to the same game object, right? So this script is attached to the same game object as this animator. There's the script, there's the animator. So in order to talk to the animator, I create a variable that is of type animator. And then in start, I actually assign an animator to that variable by using this getComponent function. And this just looks at the game object and finds the first thing of this type that it sees and returns that. So that's kind of what's going on there. And then in update, I can use an if statement to check for a button press. So if input.key get key down, that's what I'm looking for. And then I'll go keycode.space. So this function, get key down, takes a key code, which there's this kind of default thing for. I can also do .t.a, but I'll use the space bar. And so if the space bar is pressed down, do whatever's in here. And so I will say anim.setTrigger, which I believe our trigger was just called yell. And so you give it the name of the trigger in quotes. And it's as simple as that. So now if I switch back to here and I hit play, so he's punching. Now if I spacebar, now he's entered his yell. All right. And probably at this point we would want to have a transition back. So and just leave this the way it was, so leave it with its exit time. So once he finishes his yell, he goes back to boxing. So he's stuck in that loop. It's quite a long loop actually, and then he's back to boxing. So that's basically how you would control things with the animator. There's also, we could try, instead of yell, we could try bool. So trigger is the only one where we don't have to pass along extra information. The bool, we have to tell it what we're setting the bool to, so true or false. Boolean values are true or false. So add my bool. Let's see, I'll call it like punching. So, okay, fine. And let me get rid of this really quickly so I can click on this transition or condition. Okay, actually, let's just get rid of all the transitions so far. So let's say I want to make it so that maybe make it so that he's in this yelling state by default, and then as long as I'm holding down the space bar, it stays in this punching thing. So he'll punch as long as I'm holding the space bar, and then when I release it, he goes back to the yelling. That's a slightly more complicated behavior than what we had for this yell trigger. So I'll go ahead and get rid of that. Okay, so I'm going to set yelling to be the default layer state. So I just right click and then do that. So now we start here and we go there by default. We go to yell. We start at entry and we go to yelling by default, I should say. So now I'll create my transitions back and forth. And then I'll say, click on this one. I'll uncheck has exit time and I'll add a condition. So you can see now this has our punching parameter. And then I can say whether it's true or false. So I want to leave that to true. So now when we're in yelling, if punching is ever true, then we will start boxing. And then here we'll add one and say if punching is false, we'll go back to yelling. So this one, transition from yelling to boxing if punching is true. And then this one says transition from boxing to yelling if punching is false. So if we're not supposed to be punching. So now I need to change my script. Instead of when I press the key down, setting a trigger, every frame checking the state of the key and setting this true or false. So let's see what that looks like. So let's see, I can create a bool, say is punching, and set it equal to input.getKey. So last time I was using getKey down. This only returns true the first frame that I've pressed the key down. If I just use getKey, this returns true every frame that the spacebar is down. So I'll do that. Then key code.space. And then I'll say anim.set not trigger, set bool. Yeah, there we go. And I have to give it the name, which I forgot, so I'll just look. It's punching. And then the value is punching. So this is a different function than we used before. Before we had set trigger, which only needed the name of the trigger. This one, set bool, needs the name of the parameter that we're setting and then the actual value that we're setting it as. This is also true for set integer. We would give it the name of the parameter and a value, a number. and also set float. But we're just doing this bool for now. So I'll hit play. So now he's yelling. Oh, whoops, I forgot something. I have to turn off has exit time. So then it'll make that transition instantaneously. So let's try that again. I'll hit play. And we're in his yelling loop. And we'll see in a second if it actually loops. Okay, sure does. And now I'll press the space bar down. We can see as soon as I did that, that checkbox turned on. And now I'll release the space bar, and that checkbox turned off, and we're back to yelling. So on, off, on, off, on, off. Something I just noticed, that punch caused him to move forward a little bit. So we can change that. 1 second. Okay, sorry, I had to sneeze there. We can change that, make it so he doesn't move around every time by turning off root motion here. So now all these animations are just kind of centered in place. It can look a little awkward. Or I can go into my animations and change these settings here. So if I bake these into the pose, then it'll automatically kind of reset us back built into the pose. So what do I mean? I'm going to check these boxes actually for all of these and just hit apply. And you'll see that when I did that now, that boxing animation shouldn't move us forward too much. Oh, maybe it does. Well, perhaps another way to solve this is to add this exit time thing. So now it actually loops back to where we were every time. So you can kind of see how you could start to build more complicated behaviors with a bunch of different parameters, with a bunch of different animations, and so on. So that's the end of this video.